Okay, we're live. Give me a second here. All right, come on in, everybody. Welcome back to the Holler. Justin Canoe here, tnholler.com, at the tnholler on Twitter and Facebook. We also have hollers hollering all across the state. Thanks to your support, we really do appreciate it. Your small dollar monthly donations keep us hollering. Shout out to Elisa Parker for her support. If you're buying or selling a home in Tennessee, do it through her. That's a way to support us. And if you need a lawyer, Abby Rubenfeld at Rubenfeld Law. Check her out. She's awesome. All right. Today, we are talking about something that happened yesterday that a lot of people were waiting a long time for. As you may have heard, former Speaker Glen Casada, the shortest serving speaker in Tennessee history, was picked up, arrested by the FBI at his home, as was his chief of staff, Cothren. It made big news. It was in the New York Times. Should have been in more national papers, frankly. Hopefully somebody will pick that up at some point. And they both were arraigned yesterday at the federal courthouse in Nashville. And so today we're going to talk to Representative Bo Mitchell about what happened. Also, if you're commenting along, let me know if you can hear that echo, because I can hear myself, but I just want to make sure that's just me that can hear that. Bo, how are you today, man?
Hey, good morning.
All right, so full disclosure, like I was going to come on here and sort of jokingly celebrate the arrest. But when I was there at the courthouse yesterday, you could feel like the heaviness of what these guys are facing. You know, I mean, they're both facing something like 320 years in prison as a maximum sentence, $4 million fines. Obviously, those are the maximums, and, you know, we don't want to go there with where they're probably going to end up. But there is a seriousness about what they're facing. Casada was skinny, forlorn. You know, Cade looked a little more defiant, wearing a gray T-shirt and a mohawk, and said some cryptic stuff. What was your feeling when you found out that they had finally been arrested by the FBI?
As many others, faith in the justice system once again. You know, when you see crimes just happening in broad daylight in front of, you know, the state and the nation, and nothing's done, it's really depressing. You know, being in the minority is one thing, but being in the minority and watching the criminality of Casda and others, you know, is just depressing.
So it sounds like this was something that you expected. Had you sort of given up on it? I mean, it had been months and months since the FBI raid, you know, since we saw, as we all remember, Casada standing in his robe, his too short robe, getting raided by the FBI. Did you think, oh, this might not be happening anymore, or did you still think this was coming?
You know, you've got to keep faith in the justice system. You know, the wheels of justice move slowly sometimes, but it hadn't been months. It's been years. You know, many of us hope this stems from the voucher scandal. You know, the bribery openly on the House floor by Casada and others. Hopefully, this was just the beginning of many more indictments to come for others.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because there is speculation that what's really going on here is Casada and Cade are being rolled up because of their involvement with what even Republicans have called a bribes and threats scheme to get the vouchers passed in 2019 in a vote that was held open by Glen Casada at the time for 35 minutes until he could finally get Jason Zachary to flip. Even Kent Calfee, a Republican, said bribes and threats were used. Bob Ramsey, who just got primaried and is no longer in the legislature as of this next session, said there were bribes and threats. I think Terry Lynn Weaver mentioned it, also primaried, also gone. And then the big one, and I'd like for you to talk about this a little bit. We heard from John Mark Windle, now an independent, was a Democrat in a red county, that he was offered a military promotion in the National Guard, a generalship, something that seemingly only the governor could have offered him. Do you think that's what this is about? And how confident are you?
I'm not. We can only hope. I mean, all of us who were on the floor that day and witnessed what happened, and just the abuse of power and just the criminality that vote was. We can only hope that justice will be served to those involved in it. As you said, it wasn't 35 minutes; it was more like 45 minutes. And Casada would block many of us, blocked anyone who was against him from going out on the balcony behind the speaker's dais. He used the sergeant at arms and even brought in state troopers to block people from being able to get out on the balcony where he was doing his dirty deals and bribery, and I've never seen in all my years in the House or being a staffer in the Senate, I've never seen a member of the governor's staff on a legislative floor. And that happened that day. And that's just really strange to me that members of the governor's staff would be on the House floor during session.
So you mentioned it. I just want to show that it's not just you that thinks this. This is Republican Representative Kent Calfee essentially saying what you're saying.
There's a bill to repeal the voucher bill from last year. And I think it may be because, there was every kind of dirty trick in the book, bribes, threats, everything else to get it passed. And I tell you what, a lot of people that voted for it are really catching it from their people back home, because the people out in the districts don't want this. I've never had but one person ask me to support a voucher bill, and her story never added up, mistaken about what she thought it would do. I've never had anybody else in my district, so that's the reason I voted no.
So that's Kent Calfee. And, I play that basically, Bo, sorry, I have you muted because I was hearing the echo, but I'm going to ask you a question here. First of all, I think that's your bill that he's talking about, right? To delete the voucher bill. And then second of all, is it sort of accurate to say that all of this stuff, the FBI raids, is it the Hillsdale? Theoretically, is this all kind of tied to Governor Lee's privatization scheme and attack on our public schools?
Exactly. I mean, I'm hoping that, what they've indicted Cade and Glenn on is something totally different from any of the voucher scheme. But I'm hoping it's to put enough pressure on them. Glenn's in his 60s. He takes a 20-year sentence, and at federal level, you have to serve 90% of it. That's more or less a life sentence for Glen Casada. Cade's a young man. Does he want to go spend 20 plus years in federal prison for doing the bidding of someone else? Whether that be Glen Casada or someone else? I think not. So I'm hoping that this is just the beginning of a greater investigation. It's just hard for me to believe.
Bo seems to have dropped out there. Let me know if you can hear me. I can't hear. Okay. There you go.
Okay.
Bo, so here's a question for you. Cameron Sexton came out and said, in Tennessee, we will not tolerate public corruption, defrauding our state, or bribery at any level. I commend the FBI for its hard work, diligence, and dedication that resulted in this morning's arrest. He wrote that not long after the arrests were made, probably an hour after the arrests were made. As far as I can tell, the governor has yet to post anything about this on his Twitter feed. What do you think that says about how each of these men are reacting? And, should we be taking Cameron's post with any kind of grain of salt?
I don't know. Maybe someone's getting advice from attorneys not to comment.
Okay, well, that seems like a pretty reasonable explanation for that. Let's go ahead, and we can see you guys commenting along, by the way. We'll get to that in a second. I just want to play for Bo this moment. Yesterday, I was at the courthouse again when Casada and Cothren were arraigned. It was serious. The media was there. They waited for Casada to come out. Thought maybe he had snuck out the back, but he hadn't. He came out the front. Seems to be a believer in masks suddenly, which is interesting to note. And this was the moment when Casada was coming out.
Do you have any regrets, Glenn? You owe Tennesseans an apology. Do you feel bad about anything? I'm right here. You feel bad about anything you've done, Glenn? You want to apologize
What
to
about the Tennesseans have an expectation of honesty?
Okay, so that was Cade. That was Glenn. And then let's go ahead and watch Cade also. This was Cade coming out a few minutes later. And he actually did say one thing that I want to get your take on. Casada was silent, but Cade actually spoke briefly. And this was Cade walking out.
And all this stuff, Cade. Cade, did you have to be worried about it? You owe Tennessee an apology. Governor Lee be nervous, Cade?
Nothing at all, no apology.
Any statement at all?
Any
You feel
comment at all?
bad for any of the racist texts? At least that. We start there.
Any apologies for the people of Tennessee?
You feel bad for anything, Cade? Any remorse whatsoever? Say.
Truth will come out, Phil.
The truth will come out, Phil. Representative Mitchell, what do you think he means the truth will come out?
Like I said before, Cade's a young man, and I doubt that he wants to go spend 20 plus years in federal prison for doing the bidding of others. So, I remember that day vividly on the House floor. Cade was being sent around the House floor, and he went to a representative sitting beside me, a Republican that was on the outs with the speaker. So I knew when they were going to that representative, they didn't have the votes. I knew they didn't have the votes by just who Cade was going up to. And I remember hearing what that representative told Cade. He said, "You don't have a effing thing that I want to get me to vote for this bill." And Cade marched away. And then they eventually grabbed somebody and got him out on the balcony, and they would offer someone else something. It was just over and over in broad daylight.
Right.
So
So
again, I just don't think Cade's gonna take the fall for these guys.
okay, so Representative Mitchell seems pretty clear that he thinks there's more to be learned here, that there's more coming, and again, this all ties into Governor Lee's key agenda in what he's referring to, which is the privatization of our schools, the effort to steer public dollars to private schools, private entities like Hillsdale, like we're seeing with the Charter School State Commission, which is coming in September and October. We're going to see if they overrule some of these locals. And, just as a sort of final thing here, Representative Mitchell, do you think that any part of these guys is capable of remorse? I mean, they both have seemed so remorseless throughout this entire thing. They seem so busted. The FBI, DOJ don't generally shoot and miss like this. Do you think any part of them is sort of wishing they had operated differently, or do you think they're still feeling defiant even now?
Dealing with Casada over the years, he has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. The damage he has done to this state, education, and countless people on both sides of the aisle. I don't think anyone's going to be feeling sorry for Glen Casada anytime soon. No, he'll never be remorseful. I think Cade, again, I think being as a young man as he is, he's remorseful for doing the bidding of others that could get him sent away for a number of years and more or less ruin his life.
Yeah. Well, and do you think this will have any kind of impact on the culture in the Capitol? Do you think people will start to realize that there actually is accountability to be had somewhere, some way? Do you think this will impact things?
I think so. It kind of opens people's eyes when they see one of their colleagues walking with handcuffs and leg shackles. I hope it sends the right message.
And just to be clear, even though they weren't shackled and handcuffed in that clip, I was in the courtroom. They were both shackled and handcuffed when they walked into the courtroom. They both had to be released from the shackles and handcuffs after agreeing essentially to give up their passports, clear any potential trips with the court, so they are very much, restrained by what's going on right now. This is a very real situation for them. And, like Representative Mitchell is saying, they, that maybe this will change the way things have gone. We've seen a lot of corruption, potential corruption, up there, and hopefully this will keep people straight. Rep Mitchell, any final thoughts for people before we let you go here? And then for anybody who's still watching, I'm gonna play you a little bit of a supercut of some of Casada and Cothren's greatest hits, because even though what they are now arrested for is corruption, bribery, laundering, kickbacks, wire fraud, all kinds of stuff, there was some real ugly stuff that was not criminal that they were busted for by the press years back that led to a no confidence vote by Republicans and caused him to be the shortest serving speaker in Tennessee history. I have a supercut of that I'm going to play for you. I'm not going to make Rep Mitchell sit through it, but any final thoughts for us on this, Bo?
Again, I just hope this gives folks faith in the justice system. It's taken a long time, and hopefully this is just a good start, and there's more to come to clean up, what's going on in Tennessee. I mean, it's been happening in plain sight. And like I said, being in the minority party, you're already at a disadvantage, and have corruption on top of being in the minority is really frustrating. So I applaud the Justice Department. I applaud the FBI, hopefully for just a good beginning to hopefully an incredible ending if they will get everyone that they need to get in this investigation.
Appreciate it, Bo. Thanks for jumping on here. We will talk to you again down the line, and we'll be interested to see where this goes.
Thank you.
All right, so that's Bo Mitchell. I know we had some echo stuff. Sorry about that. I was trying to manage it as best I could. Carolyn's asking, will this possibly reverse the ability of charter schools to take money from our local public education funds? I think that remains to be seen. I don't know if the two things are going to tie together anytime soon. In the meantime, definitely push back. And right now we're faced with the state charter commission potentially overruling local school boards. That's going to come in October. There are hearings in Madison, Montgomery, and Rutherford counties in September, mid-September, where people should show up and make their voices heard in anticipation of those votes. So there are still things that you could be doing right now to push back on that. I see Rebecca Purington is watching. Good to see you. And then our buddy Gapper X, who comes on here and just says public schools are a joke. I mean, that's just not helpful. And, obviously they would be improved by more resources. My kids are in public school. Like a lot of people I know went to public schools. Public schools are not a joke. They're very important to what we're doing in this country, and we need to support them and support the teachers who make up for them, who make them up. Wanted to share this video before we get out of here as sort of, and it's pretty long, but we can pause as we go through it. But just as a reminder of some of the things that Casada and Cothren were doing even before they were arrested. This is, a supercut of Casada and Cothren and the things that we knew about them before. Actually, wait, that's the wrong video. Sorry. Things that we knew about them before the arrest. And, it was racism. It was potentially framing a civil rights activist. It was, all kinds of hang on a second. Let me see if I can find it. Sorry, guys. I'm looking for the video to make sure I'm playing you the right video. But there was cocaine in the office, and just all kinds of ridiculousness that was coming out of this office that Phil Williams told us about, every day for a very long time. And so, before anybody sheds any tears for these guys, this is what they were up to.
For an investigation into a former top aide, the Tennessee's House Speaker. Racist and vulgar text messages.
Racist text messages sent by the House Speaker's Chief of Staff. Black people are idiots. You think that black people are idiots? Using thug N-word.
And I question, is that how they see us? It's shameful.
How can you defend that? And in a 2016 exchange with Casada himself, Cothren responded with this black people meme. The House Speaker claimed he never got such a text. There's something not right about that story. I'm convinced
So Casada came on and said, I never got that text. He told Phil Valentine, may he rest in peace, that he never got the text. Lied right to Phil Valentine. Certainly pissed Phil Valentine off.
Some liberal guy living with his mom and dad in their basement created this to frame my chief of staff.
Said he was framed, and that a liberal in his basement created it to frame him, which we later learned was a lie.
I've never in those 10 years seen any kind of racist or bigoted action.
Lie.
I do not believe those are true.
But the day before, Casada had his suspicions about the source of the text messages. Casada had even tried to convince talk radio host Phil Valentine that the text had been fabricated.
I don't appreciate the fact that he came on my show and
lied to Phil Valentine, and then he started to lose the respect and support of his own caucus.
How does anybody of color feel that the third most powerful man in the state of Tennessee was complicit with racism?
We're not
so called complicit with racism by the now Republican caucus chair, who, as their whole caucus was supporting keeping a statue of the first Grand Wizard of the KKK in the Capitol.
as the Speaker's office may think we are.
Other texts showed vulgar exchanges about women with the Speaker himself.
Both men speak of women in vulgar terms.
Glen Casada says his lewd texts with former Chief of Staff Kate Cothren were, quote, locker room talk.
The Speaker, can I just touch? Cothren, LOL, okay, maybe just once. Cothren also texted, just did a gram of cocaine in my office at 10:38 a.m. on a work day.
Cocaine on Capitol Hill.
Cocaine on the job.
I mean, it was just one after the other. Like Phil Williams bombs every few days. Like the minute one of them would run out of steam, there would be another one. And I remember Phil would put up these clocks on Twitter, check out our show tonight, and just a clock, and you just knew, oh, these guys are in trouble again. And then boom, never disappointed.
Cothren brags about snorting cocaine inside his legislative office.
Casada himself had backed legislation in 2014 cutting off welfare recipients who tested positive for drugs. But in the case of Cothren, who makes $200,000 a year, the House Speaker.
That's important to keep in mind. Cothren, as all this was happening, as there was cocaine in the office, racist texts that Casada was very privy to, they were perving on women. He gave Cothren a huge raise and had him making $200,000 a year, which is more, I think, than almost anybody in the entire state that was a public employee.
Was more lenient.
Our investigation also revealed Cothren may have attempted to have a student activist's bond revoked by framing him for contacting the speaker.
Did House Speaker Glen Casada's office try to frame a young activist?
So the framing of Justin Jones, something that we never really got to the bottom of. The story there was after Justin threw iced tea at the speaker and it went to court, the DA said you can't contact Casada, and Justin didn't. And then suddenly an email pops up where that's supposedly from Justin, post-dated after the time where he wasn't allowed to contact him. But we later found out that Justin had sent that email before, and seemingly somebody doctored the email to show that it was after, which would have had his bond revoked and put Justin in jail.
Did you send the altered email to the DA's office? It's a simple yes or no question.
It was a shock because it was my freedom. If this would have went.
And let's keep in mind something quite tasty here, which is as Casada and Cothren are now in cuffs and facing 320 years in prison, Justin Jones is now a state representative.
Do it to revoke my bond, I would be in jail right now.
I know nothing of that.
How did that happen?
I do not know nothing. I know nothing of that. Nothing.
Speaker Casada told us his office did absolutely nothing wrong.
Were you trying to frame this young activist? If you want to defend yourself, now's the time.
This was an extreme form of retaliation where you're willing to lie to take away somebody's freedom.
Jones says that while former House Speaker Beth Harwell routinely met with his group to hear their concerns, Casada has refused.
There's an extremism. This is a mean group. You see a sort of drunkenness with power.
It's important to keep that in mind. Beth Harwell would meet with Justin and the activists that were pushing to get rid of that statue. Casada dodged them, lied, and eventually Justin threw that iced tea, which he is not proud of and, does not stand by, but it had been boiling up because they had been lying and ducking and refusing to even discuss an issue that was very important.
This follows a legislative session in which Casada repeatedly dodged questions about allegations that a member of his own party had sexually assaulted 3 teenage girls.
And then let's not forget this, which frankly was one of the reasons that we started the holler in 2019 and was at the very root of so much of what was going on at that time, which is Representative David Byrd apologized on tape to one of 3 women who accused him of sexual abuse when he was their coach in high school, their basketball coach. And after that came out, after the apology was released, Speaker Casada still appointed Byrd chair of an education subcommittee of all things, which was a huge slap in the face and horrifying. And he's my representative. I went to a town hall to talk to him about it, ended up recording a 5-minute video that ended up on CNN about that. And it was really the beginning of the holler. And as these women were putting pressure on Casada to answer for doing this and for Byrd to resign, we started following them around in 2019. And that was really sort of the beginning of the holler and, really the beginning of the end for Casada, because it was just such a horrific decision. Even Marsha Blackburn was grossed out by this guy. He's now not running again. Finally, even right now, as we sit here, still a representative, was not forced to resign, no investigation, a stain on the Tennessee Republican Party to this day.
Did he ever touch you inappropriately?
Yes, my breast and below the belt as well.
His words were, I want you to feel how you make me feel. I want you to feel it throbbing.
His penis was between my butt cheeks.
Many in Tennessee assumed that the state representative would step down. In fact, his own party asked him to. He was just named chairman of a key education subcommittee. One of his chief defenders is Tennessee's House Speaker. The House Speaker's response, quote, "If I was raped, I would move."
Me, if I was raped, I would move and hell would have no fury.
So that's me recording that video. He says it was surreptitious recording. It was not. It was in my left hand. I was pointing it up at us. It was very obvious. He talked to me for 6 minutes. He shouldn't have done that. I don't know why he did that. It was arrogance, I believe. But there was not a hidden camera. It was just in my left hand pointing up at us as we were speaking.
Where should we all move?
Speaker Casada would not speak with CNN on camera.
He's admitted this on tape. That's where we disagree. He did not admit to it.
I've lived with that, and you don't know how hard it has been for me.
I'm a father of a 2-year-old daughter.
Stone cold liar.
I have 2 daughters myself. So how do you sleep at night?
He has said publicly that he's already met with me.
Casada said he met with the survivors, the victims, with Christy Rice, and talked to them. He had not met with them. He never met with them. Like, easily provable stuff. Just lying. The guy, like, this gives you, I'm telling you this because I think it's important to have a sense of how easily this man lies, how arrogant he was, and, you know, how easy it is to believe that he would have done things like creating a fake company, funneling money, laundering money, all this stuff.
The tapes? I have. Have you listened to the victims? They came into my office and spoke.
He knows that's not true.
They came into my office. He says they came into my office and spoke. They had not done that. Like, who lies about talking to sex abuse victims? Like, let that in for a second. It never happened.
I know it's not true. He ran ads basically calling us liars.
I don't think they're lying.
He ran ads calling them liars in support of David Byrd. So they came out and said this happened. She released this audio of him 10 minutes long. Go look for it. Happy to repost it. 10 minutes long of saying how sorry he is, prays about it, never stops thinking about it. Obviously talking about this. Even after that came out, Casada ran ads in their district, calling them liars, saying that it's the liberals and the Democrats making this up to hurt David Byrd. And he ended up getting reelected significantly. Calling them liars, supporting them, got this guy back in office. Instead of disassociating with this guy, as even Marsha Blackburn did, Casada supported him, got him reelected, and appointed him to an education subcommittee. So to me, for anybody who's even close to thinking about having empathy, sympathy for Casada as he does this, that is unforgivable.
I think you're believing something is not true.
And he went to the sides of my breast, underneath my arms.
That's something I'm still asking forgiveness for.
Liberty and justice for all.
You have to step out.
By whom?
By whom? By the General Assembly.
So we were there covering as these women were protesting. These women are sitting there silently with signs that they're allowed to have, not raised up, but by their chests. They gavel into recess. The speaker's office calls down to have them removed because David Byrd is uncomfortable. They weren't speaking, nothing. Speaker Casada has them removed. And I was there too, and I was the first to go.
The Speaker's office.
So Speaker Casada is kicking out these women?
We're not in session. We did not say a word during the meeting.
Oh, okay. I'm going first, I guess. I'm going willingly. You don't have to break my arm.
I don't think they have grounds to remove us. Slowly losing any kind of trust with our public officials.
Anything that's a hindrance or a distraction has to be moved out of the way.
The right to assemble does not guarantee a silent meeting and a meeting.
Cutting Rep Mitchell's mic, who you just saw, cutting mics was a big thing that Speaker Casada did quite often when people were saying things that he didn't like.
I wanted to continue that announcement. The member is correct. The Supreme Court has said that
You're unfinished business.
Shoving match involving House Speaker Glen Casada. Democrats tried to walk out. The Speaker, though, tried to lock the
Democrats tried to walk out at one point to not give them quorum, enough people to conduct business. He tried to lock them in.
doors.
Why are they allowed out? The lawlessness and the culture of arrogance that we've seen demonstrated throughout this session.
House Speaker Glen Casada kept the vote open for 40 minutes.
Now, this is the voucher vote that we talked about, where they didn't have the votes to pass their public money for private school vouchers. And so Casada kept the vote open while he leaned on people to flip to get the votes to pass the bill. And Jason Zachary from Knoxville was the one who flipped, and this thing passed, and vouchers were implemented for a minute, then blocked, now unblocked, and now right now as we sit there unblocked again, only in Memphis and Nashville. So none of these Republicans want vouchers in their own districts. They only want them in Democratic controlled or Democratic represented districts where the voters can't impact them. Think about the hypocrisy of that. Even if you're for vouchers, to have them only in places that Democrats represent, I mean, it says all you need to know.
FBI agents have begun interviewing legislators about whether any improper incentives were offered to pass the bill. Hawk says Cothren said, "The Speaker and I need your vote on."
Hawk is a Republican. Look at that quote. Look at that quote. And that may be really why Casada is in cuffs today, is potentially, maybe, because of what was going on that day. And all of the other stuff may be linked to that. Maybe.
The voucher bill. What do you want? Representative Bob Ramsey from Maryville said the suggestion was that this could favorably affect revenue expectations.
And Ramsey just lost a primary because he opposed the privatization of our public school system. And he was openly saying at the time that they were offering bribes for his vote. So all of this, Hillsdale, the Charter Commission, maybe even Casada and Cothren, Ramsey, Terry Lynn Weaver, all of this is fallout potentially from Governor Lee's privatization of public schools scheme, which has a lot of money attached to it. I mean, it's not just about ideology. There's also a lot of money involved.
In my district, eventually,
Democrats sent a letter to the U.S. Attorney today asking for a full investigation.
Surveillance system has been installed. An extraordinary breach of trust. From my reading of the statutes, it's a felony.
Speaker Casada, did you ask him to step down because he voted against vouchers, sir?
Why are you protecting David Byrd? What does David Byrd know on you, Speaker Casada? As a rule-changing woman and survivor, I'm disappointed Glen Casada didn't show his face here today.
We come, God, praying that our brothers here who guard this door know that we come in a spirit of nonviolence, but what is violent is racism. What is violent are these policies that deny healthcare and voting rights. What is violent is that statue that commemorates white supremacy and hatred and intolerance. That is violence, oh God. So we pray, God, that you might touch these troopers. You let them know that there were troopers before who stood on the bridge in Selma, God, but you brought them down, God. There were troopers who stood in the doorsteps of schools, oh God, but you brought them down, oh God.
I think it's time to go. Time to move on.
We don't need to be pulled down by Speaker Casada. He needs to step down and as Speaker and then allow Williamson County to find out if they want to keep him as a representative.
He willfully lied. If you can't go into his office and trust him to tell you the truth and walk out of it, then he's the wrong person in that office. He should resign.
Casada also lost support of Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally.
If I was in that deep water, I think I'd just go home.
I can't believe he hasn't resigned already.
It is hard not to wonder if many more voices will join him.
If at this point Glen Casada were a member of your administration or an executive at your company, would you call for him to step down? Would you ask him to resign?
I would.
So, oh man, that's a trip down memory lane. I think it's important to note that Casada, even after all that, got reelected by Williamson County, is still, right now, a state representative for my district, which is really embarrassing for Williamson County and Tennessee and the Republican Party that did nothing about this guy being in their caucus, sitting up there, and let him stay, let Byrd stay. So there's a lot going on here. A lot to be upset about, ashamed of, and that really brought back some emotions, honestly, for me, because, that was a long time ago, a lot of that stuff, but there has been no closure for any of it. There have really been no repercussions until maybe this week with Casada finally paying for some of those transgressions. But it's important to keep in mind, most of the things that you saw in that video had no accountability. This is now him being held accountable for financial misdeeds. Nothing in that video, even the bribery stuff and the vouchers, was in the indictment. People think that that has something to do with it, but that's not in the indictment. So the racism, the sexism, the drugs, all that stuff, really wasn't what he was held accountable for. Now, he was taken down as speaker, and Byrd did step down as chair of that education subcommittee. That statue is gone from the Capitol. Justin Jones is now a representative. So we have seen change. We have seen progress. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, that the pressure has worked in many ways. And so you should feel good about that. The women who fought so hard should feel good about that. The women who spoke up in Wayne County should feel like they were heard. Really important. So, but other than that, I think it's a real shame how some of this stuff was overlooked and forgiven, and how much has gone on. And so we were able to, I didn't show Casada in cuffs, no, because you weren't allowed to take pictures inside the courtroom, inside the courthouse, frankly. But we did see him. You can live vicariously through me. He was in shackles and cuffs in the courtroom, and then he was let off after they arraigned him. Gapper's asking what's up with the green screen. Yeah, I figured I'd throw up a background so you didn't have to look at my windows anymore. And I know I'm buzzing because it's not a real green screen, but I figured I'd give it a shot. If anybody has any questions, let me know. Share the supercut. The supercut, if you search TN Holler or the TN Holler and supercut on Twitter, you'll find it. We posted it again yesterday. Supercut itself is important, just so people know. There's been so much that has gone on even since then. It's hard to keep up. And honestly, that supercut could have been an hour long or more. There should be really a documentary about this whole thing. But in the meantime, appreciate you guys watching. As always, there's all kinds of stuff going on. We'll try to hop back on and talk about it another time. I'll be talking to Ronnie Glenn, who's running for state rep in Clarksville today at 1:00. Check it out. Rebecca says, thanks for the wonderful walk down Nightmare Lane. Too bad so many lives were harmed and continue to be harmed by the vile acts of these men. I hope the FBI is investigating why Rep. Ogles did a 180 on his voucher vote. Will he be allowed to just slip away? Good question. As people remember, Rebecca ran against Rep. Ogles and would have been a better choice. And appreciate that she continues to speak out about it. Gapper digs the background. That's good to hear. So much appreciated. So much appreciate you all. We have an announcement coming this week, or maybe even early next week, about October 3rd. Pencil October 3rd in Nashville at night into your schedules. We are going to be having an event that will tell you about. Keisha Davis is running in 63 this year. Yes, important to note, Keisha Davis is running for the seat that Casada left behind. So keep her in mind. I'll have her on at some point. But again, October 3rd, Monday night, 7 p.m. in Nashville. Details are coming. We're going to have a great event that I'd love to see as many of you at as possible, even you, Gapper. But we're gonna try to have a fun night planned for you guys with a lot of great speakers and some music. So info on that coming. We'll make a big deal out of it. And as always, I appreciate you guys joining. Keep following all the hollers across the state, and we'll see you soon.